Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on over the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. With ministers expected to run for the general election next April, President Yoon Suk Yeol named new ministers, including those for finance and SMEs. What's notable about Monday's partial shakeup is that the new ministers are mostly scholars and female. The South Korean government has rolled up its sleeves to tackle having the highest suicide rates among OECD members. A new mental health care policy has been introduced with the goal of cutting the suicide rate by half within a decade. Mycoplasma pneumonia that China has recently struggled with is now going around the world, including here in South Korea. Symptoms like body aches and fever are similar to flu, and children are particularly vulnerable to this bacteria. President Yoon Suk Yeol carried out a mini cabinet reshuffle this week ahead of the general election taking place next April. Now, ministers in charge of the economy were newly named. With an additional shakeup expected to be on the way, the first round of the reshuffle focused on appointing scholars and female ministers. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Dami has this report.
President Yoon Suk Yeol has nominated people for 6 out of 19 ministerial positions. The anticipated announcement came on Monday after the presidential office started major reshuffles last week. The upcoming general election next April is forcing current ministers who are looking to run for the National Assembly to resign their posts by January 11th, the cutoff date under Public Official Election Act. For Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance, the former Senior Secretary to the President for Economic Affairs, Choi Sang-mok, has been nominated to replace Chu Kyung-ho, a two-term lawmaker who is seeking a third. Choi worked closely with the presidential office and has been a big part of the Yoon administration's economic policies so far.
The nomination comes when there are unfavorable economic conditions at home and abroad. So I feel a great sense of responsibility facing the long road ahead.
The other nominations were also for ministerial posts having a direct impact on the country's economy. Former Korea Land and Housing Corporation CEO Park Sang-woo has been nominated as Infrastructure Minister, while Kang Do-hyung has been put forward to head the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. To lead the SMEs and Startup Ministry, Oh Young-ju, who most recently served as Second Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, has been nominated. Kang Jung-hae, a former president of Sookmyung Women's University, has been nominated as Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, and Song Mi-ryung is looking to head the Ministry of Agriculture. It's also noteworthy that the nominations announced on Monday are all scholars and experts in their fields with no direct political experience, with the general elections coming up in April. In fact, the majority of the incumbents were already politicians when they were nominated. This is a trend likely to continue with more nominations yet to come. Justice Minister Han Dong-un is also being closely watched by the public. While he is a key man in the Yoon administration and a close confidant to the president, he could also be seeking to debut in politics. In addition, the Foreign Affairs Minister Park Jin is under scrutiny about his potential moves. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The chair of the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission was also newly nominated this week. That is Kim Hong-il for his new role of leading the Korea Communications Commission, that's the nation's main broadcasting watchdog. The announcement from the top office came on Wednesday. That's just 5 days after the former KCC chair, Lee Dong-kwan, resigned while facing an impeachment vote. The top office said that the broadcast watchdog currently faces issues with conflicting interests from different parties and that Kim, a career prosecutor, would suit the role. However, the hearing process is expected to be heated with Kim's lack of media experience and the current division between the two main parties in media-related issues. And parliamentary approval is not required for the president to appoint the position. South Korea is notorious for having high suicide rates, in fact, the highest among the OECD members. To bring down these high suicide rates, the government this week sketched out a set of new measures. For more, we have our Choi Soo-hyung here in the studio. Welcome back, Soo-hyung.
Good to be here again, Dami.
So, Soo-hyung, South Korea having such high suicide rates, this is nothing new though, right?
Yes, Dami. Paradoxically for us, the fact that the suicide rate is high doesn't seem that unfamiliar. Since 2003, South Korea's suicide rate has consistently ranked first among OECD countries, except for the years 2016 and 2017, when it ranked second, following Lithuania. The problem is, the rate is about twice that of the OECD average. Last year, the suicide rate was 25.2 people per 100,000, about 2.3 times higher than the OECD average of 10.6 people.
Which is why the lowering the suicide rate has long been the government's one of top to-do list, right? Walk us through what's been done so far.
Yes, Dami, the previous policy was focusing on after-the-fact treatment and was more passive. Moreover, officials said there was a lack of integration and sharing of real-time suicide management data among government departments, leading to insufficient coordination. Additionally, there has been a shortage of active promotion to improve awareness about mental health problems and counseling procedures within different age groups and with different symptoms. To break this cycle, the Ministry of Health and Welfare unveiled a new initiative on December 5th that aimed to better deal with mental health issues. President Yoon Suk Yeol presented the government policy vision to address mental health issues and to enhance the quality of life of sufferers.
특히 저출산 시대에 국민의 정신건강 문제를 해결해서 개인의 역량과 삶의 질을 높일 때 국가 성장을 견인해 나갈 수 있습니다. 정부는 이제 예방 치료 회복에 이르기까지 전 과정의 지원 체계를 재설계해서 정신 건강 정책의 패러다임을 획기적으로 바꿔 나갈 것입니다.
So a lot has been done to really tackle that issue, but what makes this new initiative any different from the previous ones?
First, to improve on these old mental health policies, the new approach is more proactive and highlights 4 key tasks. Firstly, the government aims to build a system that's integrated into daily life. People can check their mental health quickly and easily by mobile via the messaging application KakaoTalk, and a brand new number 109 will be launched to integrate suicide prevention emergency hotlines. Secondly, there'll be swift and continuous treatment and management for patients with a severe mental illness. The government also will increase financial support for outpatient care by keeping in touch with those who have had severe mental health problems. As for the long-term strategy for people with severe mental health issues, there'll be better housing support for economically independent living. There will also be officially recognized as a socially vulnerable group, and more people will be eligible for medical insurance, even if they have a record of mental health issues. At the moment, some insurance companies don't offer cover to such people. Lastly, there will be improved awareness of mental illnesses to dispel prejudice. Efforts will be made through nationwide campaigns and university club activities so that mental illnesses are seen in a similar way to physical ailments.
So what the government is trying to say is it's trying to detect the disease at an early stage, and the government is also trying to achieve that 0.5% drop in the rate by within a decade, right?
Yes, with these 4 key tasks, the Yoon administration is seeking to cut the suicide rate by 50% within a decade. Especially considering the increased rate of suicide among young people last year, the plan is to shorten the mental health checkup interval for young people from 10 years to 2 years. Additionally, through the Employee Assistance Program, it aims to link counseling services within the workplace, including specific coaching services to reduce anxiety and stress. The government has also announced plans to increase the employment rate for people with mental disorders from the current 10.9% to 30% as part of efforts to enhance awareness. The Minister of Health and Welfare Ministry, Cho Kyu-hong, expresses aspirations.
The government will provide mental health care services to all nationals and residents whenever and wherever through these policies, and build a society where people with mental illnesses can integrate into society without problems.
Though a specific start date hasn't been revealed, through these four main strategies, the government plans to provide psychological counseling to 1 million people by 2027 and reduce the suicide rate by 50% within 10 years.
Sure, let's see how policies at this time will actually help curb those high rates. Thank you so much for that report, Soo-young, today.
My pleasure.
We turn to the latest figures on South Korea's economy. The country's economy expanded by 0.6% from July to September on the back of recovering semiconductors and exports. Our An Sung-jin has this report.
South Korea's preliminary real gross domestic product for the third quarter of 2023 has increased by 0.6% compared to the previous quarter. Data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday noted that this figure was consistent with the advanced estimate released in October. The increase in the third quarter was mostly driven by a recovery in the chip industry.
Exports and production saw an on-quarter increase for 2 consecutive quarters, and as memory chip prices stopped falling, it can be said that the semiconductor industry has entered into a recovery phase.
This helped pull up the manufacturing sector, which grew by 1.4% as production for computers, electronics, and optical products rose. This also pushed up exports by 3.4% on quarter. Private consumption also saw a 0.3% increase as spending on food services, accommodation, and cultural activities increased. The quarterly GDP growth rate for this year has maintained a similar rate of increase, lingering above the baseline of 0%. Meanwhile, real gross national income increased by 1.6% in the third quarter compared to the previous quarter. Although the net factor income from outside of Korea decreased, as the terms of trade improved, the GNI saw a larger increase rate than real GDP. The Bank of Korea issued its preliminary quarterly estimates on the country's real GDP and income within 70 days of the end of the quarter, with the finalized data expected to be issued within the next year and a half. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
With high consumer prices, many companies here in South Korea are deciding to keep prices the same but reduce the amount or size of their products, which is described with the word shrinkflation. The government has decided to take action and come up with measures in response. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young has the details.
A South Korean brewery has reduced the volume per can in a beer bundle pack. Cuts in quantity can be also found in items like frozen dumplings, canned tuna, and chips. This phenomenon, so-called shrinkflation, occurs when manufacturers reduce the quantity of a product while keeping everything else, including price and package design, the same. There is another term called skimflation, where companies keep the prices but cut back on the quality of products or services. As an example, one leading orange juice brand reduced its actual real juice content from 100% to 80%, but left the quantity the same. Even though there is a labeling system called unit pricing, which helps consumers compare prices using a standard unit of measurement, it is still difficult for them to remember the price of each item.
When it comes to ice cream, I'm a bit disappointed because the quantity seems much less compared to before. I'd rather pay a little more and enjoy the original amount I used to get.
This to me sounds a little bit sneaky, that not to tell the customers or still keep the same packaging but reduce the amount in there. That's not really very fair to the customers like me who don't normally pay attention to the amount.
This comes amid efforts by the government to curb food prices by managing prices for individual items. But the pressure appears to have backfired, leading manufacturers to seek indirect methods of raising prices, such as shrinkflation and skimflation, at a time of high inflation. One expert says it is the government's role to help consumers become aware of the changes.
The government can't stop companies from engaging in shrinkflation. What's more important is making policies that can inform consumers when there's change so they can acknowledge it and decide if they still want to buy. Putting stickers on products that have been reduced in terms of either amount or quality is one way to do that.
The Korea Consumer Agency is examining 209 processed foods and 73 other daily items for potential instances of shrinkflation, with the results expected to be announced in December. New regulations on this matter will be announced during this month. 신하영, Arirang News.
We're well into December, meaning there are now some excuses to go shopping for Christmas. And South Korea's retail sector is taking advantage of this holiday as an early marketing strategy to boost consumption before the year ends. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
Christmas has already arrived in the retail sector as it's using the winter holiday as a last-ditch marketing strategy to boost consumption. South Korea's CCSI, an indicator of how consumers feel about the economy, has been declining since July. And the pessimistic consumer sentiment is being felt by department stores as operating profits of the big three all fell by double digits in the third quarter. To draw consumers, the big three department stores have built replicas of traditional Christmas markets that are bigger than ever. Here in this colossal glass house are more than 20 wooden chalets that sell seasonal beverages and souvenirs reminiscent of Europe's famous Christmas markets. Although it was inspired by Europe, the market also sells popular Korean street foods such as tteokbokki and fish cakes. To maximize holiday season sales, it was open toward the end of November and has already encouraged people to spend money.
Oh, it's so beautiful, it's so cute. I really love it. I'm sure that I'll be back to buy things for sure.
We actually just bought candy apples here, and they were even better than what I imagined.
And on weekends, visitors have to wait hours just to get in. It's not just department stores like this one that have already begun using Christmas as a marketing strategy to boost consumption. Small businesses have also begun to do the same. Inside this traditional market is a cake shop run by a young entrepreneur. In a nod to her store's location, she sells cakes made out of rice cake ingredients instead of flour. She steams the rice cake into a circular shape and is decorated with colorful frosting along with cake toppers that make it look like the cakes that we typically see in bakeries. She says that she started accepting Christmas cake orders early during the second to last week of November.
Even though this type of cake is usually bought by older people, around Christmas the demand goes up because young people also buy it.
One expert says that all these efforts are likely to pay off.
The Christmas markets and cakes will act as a catalyst of sorts that lead people to purchase items not holiday-related as well.
She added that while consumers this year might not have a large disposable income, these early Christmas marketing campaigns will motivate customers to open up their wallets. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
China has halted customs procedures for urea exports to South Korea. Now, urea is used to reduce emissions from diesel vehicles. It's especially a concern for South Korea because the country experienced a supply shortage back in 2021. Though South Korea has enough urea inventory for more than 3 months, the government has laid out measures to deal with the issue. Our Park Kwon-woo has more.
South Korea will double its public reserves of urea used in diesel vehicles and seek countries to import it from in order to cope with potential shortages due to China's recent restrictions on urea exports. During a pan-government key economic security items task force meeting on Wednesday, the government said it will be increasing the inventory of urea from 6,000 to 12,000 tons and provide 2,000 tons beforehand to industries where supply is tight. The government also said it will look for other supply channels for urea, including Saudi Arabia, where discussions are being made, as well as Qatar, Indonesia, and Japan. It also said it would provide subsidies to companies that import urea from countries other than China, the world's largest producer of the material, as shipping expenses can be 10 to 20% higher when importing from other countries. The government said it will continue to consult with China to solve the issue. Meanwhile, the government will also ask gas stations to set purchase limits of urea at gas stations to prevent panic buying, although some gas stations already have such measures in place. Despite efforts being made to combat possible urea shortages, the South Korean government said the situation is not as serious as the last urea solution crisis 2 years ago. It explained there is at least a 3-month usable reserve left and other supply channels in place to cope with the issue. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
No face-to-face classes or teacher-student interactions. The COVID-19 pandemic was a stress test for education systems across the globe. But students here in South Korea still managed to excel in their academic careers. This is according to the OECD Program for International Student Assessment. PISA tested nearly 700,000 15-year-old students in 81 countries or economies on mathematics, reading, and science. If we look at their actual scores released on Tuesday, their grades on average fell 16 points in math, 11 in reading, and 2 in science. Those are huge drops considering 20 points indicates a falling 1 year behind in the academics. Now, those of South Korean students went up 1 point in math and reading and 9 in science, placing South Korea 6th in mathematics, 4 in reading, and 5th in science. And it wasn't just for South Korea. Students in countries like Taiwan, Japan, and Singapore scored higher than the students of other countries. And these are the countries that had a shorter period of school closure with better virtual lecture systems. But there are also comments that the poor grades on average were not due to the pandemic. Instead, the grades among students in developing countries were already on a decline way before the pandemic. China has been seeing an unusual surge in the cases of Mycoplasma pneumoniae, which is a common cause of pneumonia in children. But countries around the world are also raising alarm as they are also confirming the cases of this bacteria. Our Song Yujin tells us more.
Concerns rise with the spread of respiratory diseases in South Korea and in other countries. The illnesses include both the flu and what's called the Mycoplasma pneumoniae, the main pathogen causing community-acquired pneumonia in children and young adults. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, 270 Mycoplasma pneumoniae inpatient cases were counted during the 4th week of November, a 1.6% increase from the first week of that month. Mycoplasma pneumoniae causes cold-like symptoms and, in worst cases, pneumonia.
Mycoplasma is concerning medically and epidemiologically in the fact that it is quite transmissible among people who are more vulnerable than the others.
The same doctor specifically noted that children up to 4 years old and those immunely weaker are the most vulnerable. He's also concerned about newer cases being resistant to regular antibiotics, leading to doctors using stronger ones. The expert spoke about preventive measures which are similar to what people did during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Would be prevented if we were to, constantly and very frequently wash our hands, wear the mask, and avoid going to public spaces and coming into very close contact with people who are having symptoms.
Meanwhile, in China, where Mycoplasma pneumoniae has also surged recently, specialists attributed the spike to it being the first full winter after strict COVID-19 restrictions were lifted last year. The Chinese Education Ministry issued a notice on preventing and controlling winter epidemic diseases in schools by ordering absent students to be monitored, personal hygiene to be strengthened, and also requesting a stockpiling of masks. This was the first warning issued by the Chinese government related to the spread of respiratory diseases since its zero-COVID policy last year. Elsewhere, officials in Denmark and France said Mycoplasma pneumoniae is now being considered an epidemic, despite the World Health Organization saying it is not a reportable disease and it appears to be in decline. 송유진, Arirang News.
The New York Times has chosen South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol and K-pop girl group New Jeans as part of its 71 most stylish people of 2023 list. Posting an image of Yoon singing American Pie in April during a state visit to the U.S. for a summit with U.S. President Joe Biden, the Daily referred to his pitch-perfect performance at the White House, calling it worthy of American Idol. The New York Times also highlighted New Jeans' accomplishments this year. It said the group has a sound inspired by late 90s and early 2000s R&B, adding that New Jeans has also become the first female K-pop act to play at Lollapalooza. Wednesday's list also included Phoebe Philo, a fashion designer who launched her own collections after leaving Celine, as well as an American rapper and singer Doja Cat. Also on the same day, Time magazine named singer Taylor Swift its Person of the Year. Now, the 33-year-old star who broke box office records with her Eras tour and is hailed as boosting the economy of every city she visits told Time that this is the proudest and happiest I've ever felt and the most creatively fulfilled and free I've ever been. Time magazine also noted that Taylor Swift is the first person from the arts to be honored for her success as an entertainer. That is all we have for this week. We thank you for watching Weekly News Highlights. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.